Racehl, Gilliam, welcome to Bereave Studios. The goal of this podcast is to build community through shared experiences, and today we talk a little bit about your journey. Racehl, you and I were connected by a mutual friend who basically said to me, and it was something very similar to, Justin, you have to meet this amazing woman with an incredible story, and didn't give much context other than that. And so I, of course, just said, yeah, that sounds amazing. And you've been so generous in the past several weeks in kind of sharing your time and your experience with us. And I think you bring so much can bring so much warmth and encouragement to so many people. I've been delighted to get to know you a bit. You've also been building a community of your own through Instagram, through your podcast that we'll talk about. And you send out daily encouragement texts that are to help people move through their own journeys. Racehl, I'm super curious. When I asked you, I told you about what we were doing and said, hey, would you like to do this? You emphatically said yes. I'm curious, like, why did you think it was important to show up with us today?
I just remember being so early into my grief journey, which I know we'll get into, and you're just so desperate to feel normal. You're Googling, is this normal? You're trying to figure out, are people feeling and experiencing what I'm experiencing? And so I have built a community centered around wellness, but also just sharing my grief journey and my healing journey. And I love any chance that I can be a part of that for other people because it's a lifelong journey. I'm not going to sit here and say that like I'm healed, all is good. But at the
Sure.
same time, I know I'm not in that same place when I first experienced that traumatic loss. And so if I can just
Mm-hmm.
grab someone by the hand and bring them along and show them that it's not always going to feel like this, then I'm always
Mm-hmm.
willing to be a part of that conversation. And I just feel like grief needs to be normalized. It's something that we will
Mm-hmm.
all experience at some point in our lives. And if me sharing my story helps to bring that normalization, then I'm all about it.
That's just so incredibly selfless and generous of you, just to kind of not to be with bereaved today, but just in general, that mindset in general to be out almost looking for opportunities to help people to go through a similar situation that you were in. And so we're going to talk a little bit about Joe today, or Jay, as I've heard you refer to him. And can you talk a little bit about the start of your journey to where you are today? We don't need to go through all of it just yet, but how did this journey get started?
Yeah, so kind of a backstory to the backstory, but when I was 20 years old, I was diagnosed with aplastic anemia. It is a bone marrow disease. Joe, or Jay, and I were just dating at the time. He was living in Indianapolis, I was in Dallas, and we were long distance. And I spent several weeks in the hospital going through chemo, a bone marrow transplant, different transfusions, and honestly fighting for my life. And Joe was
Mm-hmm.
so supportive, flying in whenever he could to be there for me. He shaved my head when I was going through chemo and was having hair loss. And so when we got married, it was this beautiful moment of like, we made it here. Our
Mm-hmm.
wedding cake topper said the best is yet to come. And we felt like we had our whole lives in front of us because I had overcome this um, really near death sickness. My sister was my bone marrow transplant, and that's another story for another day.
Oh wow,
But
sure.
less than a year after our wedding or into our marriage, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And so this feeling of the best is yet to come, we have our whole lives ahead of us, was swept away very quickly. And so that was kind of the start. It was a very slow, painful death to witness. Cancer just comes in and steals everything from you. So from the point of March 2017, when he was diagnosed, he was 25 years old, to September 2018, just a year and a half later when he passed away. So grief and I became very close very early, kind of my mid 20s.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, what a few years to go through for both you first, and then with Jay. You said something interesting there, that you and grief became close, and it's almost kind of like there's some personification of grief here. Is that kind of the way you think about it, or am I just misreading that?
I do. I consider she's a she. She has a pronoun.
Mhm.
She is
Okay, right.
kind of my lifelong companion for better or worse, and it's just something
Mm,
that I've adopted over the years. I would say
mhm,
the first year into my grief journey, it was just running as far away from it as I could, and eventually it
mhm,
catches up to you. I would just be
mhm,
doing dishes and having panic attacks and not able to get out of bed, or I'd be like running myself into the ground just trying to stay busy, and eventually you can only run so far. So I kind of got to the point where
mhm,
I was like, we're going to be doing this for a long time, so we might as well get to know
mhm,
each other, buckle up.
mhm,
We don't always get along. I wish that she wasn't a part of my journey, but she is. And so the best thing that I can do is, like I said, to normalize it, kind of allow myself to feel the pain or whatever emotion that grief is bringing that day. But
mhm.
yeah, we're buddies. Unfortunately, I'm stuck with her.
Yeah. Sure, sure. I'm curious. You had this moment of like, hey, I have to get to know her. Um, and so many people that we talk to uh, say something similar, but that in itself is kind of its own like uh, mini journey, even though it's a big one. But it's part of the overall journey. How did you do that? How did you get to know? How did you get to know grief?
A lot of intentionality. And so I I mean, leading up to this point where I was running away from my grief, I started my podcast. I started a business. I was doing anything and everything to not think about this. And
Mm-hmm.
eventually, like I said, it just catches up. You're burnt out and you're like, what is wrong with me? And you're like, oh, yeah, my husband died 6 months ago. Life is really hard right now. And I don't have to pretend like it's
Mm-hmm.
not. And so
Mm-hmm.
I won't say I took a step back. Like I was kind of forced into taking a step back because I was just so overwhelmed with life. And
Mm-hmm.
I made it a point in a journey. I was journaling, I started therapy, and I knew that there's not going to be a point where I am just healed, like this is all good. But I wanted to
Sure.
set myself up into a better position to be able to walk into that healing. I'm a big believer that the only way out is through. We can't just kind of hide
Mm-hmm.
away from it. We can't hide away from grief. It's going to catch up to you whether you like it or not. And so, in a way, it's like learning to embrace it and learning what that looks like for you. And so that was kind of a big part of my story and how, we became close. And
Mm-hmm.
it's also a moment of acceptance too. One of the hardest things about grief, it sounds obvious, but death is so permanent. And so there's this moment where you're like, I'm going to have to get out of bed and face this every single day for the rest of my
Mm-hmm.
life. And so there's this moment of acceptance that I had where, this is my life. I wish it wasn't, but we're here now. And I have to be able to not necessarily move on because there is a difference,
Mm-hmm.
which we might get into, but being able to move forward with my grief and not trying to leave it in the past because she'll catch up regardless.
Yeah. So the you just said at the beginning of that you knew it wouldn't heal, right? You knew that grief wasn't just going to go away, and I feel like there is a misconception, especially from, let's call them non-grievers, people who haven't suffered a close loss, um, that you hear the platitudes of like time heals all and things like that, and there's this misconception that it does end. Um, how did you know that it was something that you were going to have to live with, and that it wasn't going to go away? What did you learn that through research and Googling, or like when did you ultimately start to feel that?
I think just getting to either know people that have experienced traumatic loss or even
Mm-hmm.
just engaging in content or different podcasts of people that are on the other side. Maybe they're not in the first 3 to 6 months, they're on year 4 or 5, and maybe it was decades ago. And I think that I've just learned along the way that, again, it's the acceptance part of it, but also that time doesn't heal all. Time just passes
Mm-hmm.
by, right? And so there's
Mm-hmm.
this misconception of people that haven't experienced grief that might think like, oh, well, it's been 5 years, that she should be over it. 5 years can
Mm-hmm.
pass and you can still be in the exact same space. But when you're in
Sure.
doing the intentional work of working on healing whatever that looks like for you, again, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't just go away, but my grief journey and the way that I carry my grief looks a lot different than it did 3 months, 6 months into life without Jay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it sounds like that started the path to acceptance that it wasn't going to go away. That you're not moving on, you're moving forward. Started
Mhm.
with hearing other people and talk about their journeys. It also sounds like there was a little bit of a moment that you started down that path. That you were almost seeking out maybe a community or understanding other people's experiences. How did you go about that? And how did you know to do that? And how did you ultimately go about that?
I already had like a small community on Instagram that was following my story, Joe and I dating, marriage, and the cancer diagnosis. And then I
Mm-hmm.
think just with people sharing, and then both of us living at the time in Indianapolis. He was born and raised there.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of people that just reached out to me. One of my closest friends that I've
Mm-hmm.
made in this grieving journey, she's also a widow. She messaged me on Instagram because her younger sister's best friend went to school with Joe. So she was like, you
Oh,
have to know
wow.
her. She's a young widow also.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just been these like connections that have been made like that throughout the years, that if
Yeah.
you are looking for grieving people, they are out there and they want to connect with you also. I promise you that.
Right.
So that was a big part of it for sure. It's just people connecting, people sharing my story or other people's story being shared with me so I could connect with them. But
Mm-hmm.
throughout the years, I've made a lot of friends that are in some form of fashion or have experienced grief, whether it's partner loss, parent loss, sibling loss. Everyone's looking for that community.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
also, there's that like kind of community that I interact with on a like friendly or communication basis. And then also just at the time, Twitter or Instagram, I remember coming across a thread. And if I dig in my phone, I still have it because it changed my life, literally. It was this woman talking about her son, and she was basically saying that when he first died, you could not have told me that life would be okay again. Like, you don't understand my
Mm-hmm.
hurt. You don't know what I'm going through. And when I read that, I was at that point. Like, there is nothing
Mm-hmm.
that you're going to say that's going to make me feel like I'm going to be able to get through this. Like, you don't know what
Sure.
I've been through. You don't know my story. I don't want to hear it. And she
Mm-hmm.
posted this long thread about how, like, the sun will shine again. You're going to wake
Mm-hmm.
up and it's not going to be the first thing that consumes you. You're going to be able to feel joy again. And I just remember reading that and being still in the back of my mind, like, okay, well, that's your story. You don't know mine. But it still
Sure.
gave me a lot
Sure.
of hope. I might even get emotional now because
Yeah.
it literally changed my life. Like, I can't even
Mm-hmm.
put it into words. Just seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so beautifully written. And so I kind of keep that in
Mm-hmm.
my back pocket too, that community and resources doesn't have to look like you made a best friend on Instagram like I did. It could be listening to a podcast and
Mm-hmm.
just being able to identify and knowing that you're hearing someone else's story that you can relate to, and you know that you're not alone,
Mm-hmm.
which is also kind of what I just try and create
Yeah.
for other people, because it's this like desperation of like, is this normal? Is this going to go away? And you like, there's no answer to
Mm-hmm.
that other than just being able to talk through it or having those
Mm-hmm.
conversations with other people that have been through it.
Yeah. I mean, what a beautiful moment to come across I mean, a social media thread
A
that
Twitter thread
is
changed my
literally
life.
life changing. Right, right. I'm curious, and I don't know the origin of that Twitter thread, but I'm curious if you ever reached out to that person to tell them what you just told me.
I should have. I didn't. At that point, it was like
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of thousands of like retweets, likes, comments, and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of
Okay.
saved it. I've come across it where other people have shared it in the past, but
Mm-hmm.
I should have, because I want that person should know that she
Mm-hmm.
made a huge impact on my
Yeah.
grieving journey.
Yeah.
And she was a mom who lost her son. I remember that.
Somebody told me something this morning in a topic totally unrelated, but I think I should share it with you because it's very simple. But it's not too late to do that.
I love that.
Just throwing that out there.
I should. I'm like, hey, I was on a podcast today and I brought you up. You have no idea how much you changed your life. Because you know
Yeah,
what? I would actually love if someone said that to me. So you are totally
I
right.
bet. Yeah. This person was totally right when they said it to me, and it was totally unrelated to bereave or grief or anything. Just said it. Somebody I
Yeah,
had never even met, first time meeting. So just throwing it out there, passing it along.
I love that.
Um, can you talk a little bit about your podcast and how that either? I mean, let me ask this: were you doing a podcast before Joe passed?
No,
Okay,
I
so
launched the
yeah, talk about
podcast.
it. Let's go.
Yeah. I launched the podcast. I don't regret it because
Mm-hmm.
it's such a part of me. I love what I've been able
Mm-hmm.
to build, and I've stepped away and I've taken breaks as needed. But I started the podcast, I want to say like less than a year after Joe died. And some
Okay.
people, they do that, like they're able to do their thing. I know people that have gone on to write books and podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Me knowing my own mental space, probably not the best way I could have been using my
Mm-hmm.
time. But it's something that came to me. It's called Rosé with Rae,
Mm-hmm.
which is funny because now I don't even drink anymore, but I still love it.
Right. Fair enough.
Gave up alcohol a couple years ago, but kept the podcast name. But yeah, it started as a web show, which is a fun fact, but I learned that
Mm-hmm.
web shows are really hard. So
Okay.
we
Sure.
pivoted to just podcasts for
Mm-hmm.
now. But I mean, we talk about everything, but a lot of it is just having these really tough conversations,
Mm-hmm.
but still being able to laugh and cry. Like
Mm-hmm.
you might cry from laughing. You like,
Mm-hmm.
you never know what you're going to get in an episode,
Sure.
which I love. Like later today, I'm recording an episode about psychedelics, but I've also
Okay.
recorded episodes talking about a woman who is going through IVF trying to have her late husband's child. So like we cover it all.
Whoa. Yeah.
So a lot of really great topics, but a lot of heavy topics that some people
Mm-hmm.
might be shying away from, but we just put it all
Mm-hmm.
out there. So that started
Yeah.
maybe 6 or 7 months after Jay passed away.
Okay. And do you feel like I've heard the phrase turning mourning into mission sometimes? Do you feel like that it was a response to what you were going through in the moment, or was that completely unrelated to your journey?
I've never heard that before, but I love that. And I think somewhere in there that could be a part of my journey. I've kind of
Mm-hmm.
said it like the first year of grief or right afterwards, especially if you've witnessed a very extended version of grief. Like I watched Joe's body deteriorate for months and months and months
Mm-hmm.
before he passed away. But it's almost like this, me and another widow have said, it's like this like adrenaline rush. She was on a podcast
Mm-hmm.
too, like 3 months after her partner passed away. Like I don't know what that like energy is that you need to get out, but maybe it is like mission oriented. You want to tell your story. You want to be able to help other people in their story. And
Mm-hmm.
I tell people now, like, if you feel that way, great, embrace it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also okay to sit back and not do anything. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay to just grieve. You're going to feel like you want to do all the things, especially if you already have a community. You're going to feel like I have a book inside of me. I know there's a book in me
Right.
somewhere, but I'm not forcing it. I've forced a lot of things in my grief journey. And when that happens, it's going to happen. And so, but yeah, I've never heard that, but that definitely rings true for me. There was a lot of turning mourning into mission.
And I mean, it sounds like you are certainly and just like your reasoning for being here with us today is to turn around and help other people. It also sounds like, just from the limited amount I know of Jay, that was something that one of the characteristics that he was able to portray, his care for other people. So it almost, I'm just kind of reading between the lines here, but almost allowing him and his memory to live on through some of the things that you do. Do you view it that way, or is that just something that I'm totally off on?
No, you're not off. I definitely do view it that way. I think about just everything I do and the way that I try and interact with people is to honor his life and legacy. His tombstone literally says everybody loves Joe because everybody did love him. Like, I remember in the hospitals, like wherever we stayed, the nurses like would fight over taking care of him because he's just so respectful, so easygoing. Like, he just makes you feel safe. And I was the person that was always all over the place and just, you never know what you were going to get. And so I just try and
Yeah, right.
really embody that. He's very even keeled, patient. I was none of those things. And so there's a lot of me just trying to like slow down and live my life in a way that he would be proud of. Like, even me being in sales right now, that was his dream. That's what he went to college for. If you had told me 10 years ago I would be in a sales position, I would not have believed you. But I said yes to a position 4 years ago in sales because I was like, I can do this. Like, he did this, I can do this. And I love it now. Like, I don't see myself being in a different career anytime soon, I should say. But yeah, there's a lot of like small things that I definitely try and throughout the day, throughout my life, try and just, bring honor to him or to keep him top of mind. And what's great is a lot of our friends are like that. And whenever we're doing something that he would be proud of, like sending a picture, like this one's for Joe. And even the friend that you mentioned, that connected us, I want to say she ran a half marathon a couple of years ago, and she like had things, I think, like written on her hands, like with a Sharpie or something, and she was running for Joe. So it's just like there's so many people that want to keep honoring him and keeping his legacy alive.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, you talk about community, and in our previous conversations, you've talked about just the strength of your support system and the strength of community. I'm curious, for those who don't have the support system, for those who don't have at least a small community to kind of get behind them and support them, have you encountered resources or places to turn that could be helpful to other people who are trying to navigate their new life?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of like why I share, because I know that my experiences can be very unique. The fact that there are so many people who have lost someone and all of their friends just disappear or don't know how to handle their grief, that is a lot of people's reality, but it was not mine. I tell all of my friends, you will never grieve alone. And I mean that wholeheartedly. Like, I will be in the trenches with you, and I know that they'll be in the trenches with me. But I think resources and podcasts, there are podcasts that are just like, you're just listening. And then there are podcasts that really have communities behind them. And one of my favorites is obviously Bereave, but also there's one called Grief Gang. The founder's name is Amber. I want to say she's like 25. She's young. She lost her mom when she was 19. And her wisdom, the community that she's been able to build, she just did like a grief session at Oxford. Like, she is incredible. And just the platform, the community, the connections that she's been able to make with people that are new to their grief journey. I've met people through her. I met her. She was someone that was forwarded to me, and she's just such a connector. And even if you can't like connect with her one-on-one, like I have been able to, her community is rock solid, and it's people grieving all types of losses. So I've been on her podcast for partner loss. She's obviously experienced parent loss. She talks a lot about just her journey of being a 19-year-old girl who lost her mom suddenly, And so I think it's also being open-minded that I might talk a lot about partner loss and you might not have experienced that. And I won't say loss is loss, but there is some common ground that we can have. So even if you're listening to someone's podcast, like, well, I lost a child and she lost a mom, there's still this level of hurt that we can all identify with. So the resources are out there, but I love me some Amber. I would definitely recommend Grieving to anybody.
Awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned something that I kind of want to come back to. You said your friends know that they will never grieve alone, and that that you'll never grieve alone because they are there. And you said, I'll be in the trenches with you. Can you describe what that means?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of times when people are grieving, when a friend is grieving or someone you don't know what to say, so you just shy away. Like you don't want to say the wrong thing, so you're just walking on eggshells, or maybe you just stop showing up altogether. But I like tell my friends, I might not know what to say, but I will be there for you. And not even like you have to call on me. Like I have my sister's best friend, who's a dear family friend. I've known her since I was in elementary school. She lost her dad to the same cancer that Joe actually had probably like a year and a half ago. And I just randomly had a thought about her dad one day. So I texted her. I was like, I want you to know that your dad's memory doesn't just live on with you. Like it's with all of us. He crossed my mind today. I'm thinking about him and I'm thinking about you. And I think you'd be surprised like how messages like that can go such a long way with people. Do I text her every day to check on her? No. Do I text her every time I'm thinking about her? Also no. But like it's good for people to know that I'm thinking about you. I'm here for you. And like I know there's always this like taboo of like, let me know if you need anything, but it really is like if you need something, even if I can't drop off a meal or do XYZ, I will drop what I'm doing and I will be there for you. And so I try and make sure that's very clear to my friends, but I think you'd be surprised just like what a quick text will do. I sent one this morning to one of my friends who lost her brother. And she like, I don't know what made him cross my mind. I talk to her all the time, but this morning specifically, I feel like I needed to tell her like, I'm thinking about your brother. I love him. I love you. Like you're not alone in this. And it's just a promise I make to people that I'm not going to forget about this. And so even in my phone, like if I know someone has passed away, one thing I do, like especially for widows, is I get their anniversary date. I get their partner's birthday, and then also their the day they passed away, their death day. And so I have those in my phone. I have a reminder that goes off a week before, so I can either shoot a text, send a card, send flowers, something. And it's just something I've been really intentional about like over the past few years, because that's how I would want someone to show up for me. And it's a low lift. Like people think that having to be there for your friends, like a text goes a long way. And so like I'm here for you. I'm in the trenches. I'm not going to forget about your story, your grief, your person. So yeah, that's just some ways that I try and be intentional. But yeah, it is the trenches. Like grief is hard. Like I always like try and approach it like with a good attitude, but believe me, it's not all rainbows and butterflies over here. It's a lot of tears, a lot of pain.
Yeah, sure. A lot of pain with a friend like you is I'm going to make the assumption that it's better than just a lot of pain. You're a great friend.
Thank you.
I want to touch on something because it comes up a lot, and it comes up for me. What you said, people don't know what to say, so they shy away, right? And I've heard stories of people losing friends, of relationships dwindling because their friend didn't know how to show up, or didn't show up for various reasons, probably didn't know how, didn't know what to say. For people who don't know what to say and they want to prepare themselves for the future, are there some, you've already mentioned, little things like text messaging and checking in and understanding on specific dates, what to recognize those dates. But are there things that people might be able to simply implement as a starting point to being able to support their friends that have gone through some loss?
Yeah, I mean, I think even I have sent texts before to people that like you're experiencing a form of grief that I know nothing about. And it's as simple as like, hey, I might not have the right words to say, but I am here for you. Like, and I've
Mm-hmm.
even seen some people that will send like, pick one. Like, do you want a meal delivered tonight? Do you want me to pick up your kids so I can watch them? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I can come over, do this. And just so it's not like this empty, like, if you need anything, just call me. Cause
Sure.
that probably is not going to happen. I'm not going to be like, oh yeah, Justin, I do need my laundry done. Thank you for offering.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
I think I think being intentional like that, but then also knowing that there's nothing that I'm going to say that's going to make
Mm-hmm.
my friend losing her brother feel better. Like there's nothing that I
Mm-hmm.
can say that's going to stop that hurt, that's going to stop that pain. So I think it's also
Mm-hmm.
just kind of taking some pressure off of yourself. Like you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to say the right words, you don't have to know everything to say, just be there. And I
Mm-hmm.
totally own it. Like I'm probably going to say the wrong thing. I'm probably not going to know what to say. But if you just want a shoulder to cry on, my door is
Mm-hmm.
open. And I think people put so much pressure on themselves to say the right thing. So then they might not say
Mm-hmm.
anything at all, or they just get uncomfortable when really sometimes you just need to be a listening ear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's amazing. I think one of the things that you are doing, one of the things that your friend at Amber at Grief Gang is doing, one of the things that we aspire to is to help bring a little bit of confidence around the conversation and a little bit of confidence for people to be able to show up and feel like they are equipped with at least a sentence to start the conversation. And those types of things that you just mentioned seem very simple, but when you go to pick up the phone, right, that phone gets really heavy
Yeah.
sometimes, and people just sometimes put the phone down. And by you equipping them today and throughout your work, that's going to go a long way in to kind of chipping away of the taboo nature of talking about death.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, Racehl, this has been amazing. You have clearly lived up to our friends' portrayal of you, uh, and not just today, but over the past several weeks, when as we've gotten to know each other a little bit. You're showing up with strength. You're showing up with encouragement. You're showing up with vulnerability, and thinking about like it's not all rainbows and sunshine. Like there are, this is the toughest thing that a human can go through. But there's hope, right? And you're showing up with hope for folks, and really helping show what a great friend looks like. I think we could probably do a whole nother episode on our whole panel of just getting great friends together and showing what great looks like to be a friend, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for all of that. If people want to listen to your podcast, if people want to follow you on Instagram, can you talk a little bit about how to find you?
Yeah, I'd say Instagram is the best place to start because it has all the links and everything else to find. So it's my
Mm-hmm.
full name, Racehl Simone Gilliam. And then I do have a podcast. It's called Rosé with Rae. We are on Apple, Spotify, really anywhere that you can get podcasts. And then you also mentioned the daily encouragement. So I have a text community that I call it. It's called DAILYRAE. And so you can text DAILYRAE, that's one word, DAILYRAE, to the number 22999. You'll get an automatic message back from me, and you'll get daily messages from me. Then I also have a broadcast channel on Instagram, also called DAILYRAE. So if you don't want text, you can be on Instagram. If you're not on Instagram, you can get text. So I'll try and hit you in both places.
That's amazing. That's amazing, and we'll provide links as we get to the production phase here, which we're learning. Thank you so much. Yeah, we should just take notes from you because you
Oh
know
my
what you're
gosh.
doing. Um, uh, Thank you so much for your generosity and your time and your thoughtfulness and your passion. and for making the world a little bit better place, kind of one step at a time.
Thank you. I love what you guys are doing. I'm glad to be here. Honored.